okay? Okay, good afternoon, dear delegates, and welcome to the gender-responsive climate finance side event hosted by the government of Spain. Bienvenido a todos. We are delighted today to have, let's say, a distinguished lineup of speakers with diverse backgrounds and experiences, ranging from women organizations, IFIs, and government institutions. And they are here today to share their views, to share their insights on what is the critical role of gender transformative climate finance, and what does it take to make sure that we can incorporate gender considerations and financial transparency in climate action strategies. My name is Ela Ionescu. I'm the Regional Partnership Specialist with UN Women Europe and Central Asia, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator today. UN Women is working very closely with partners on the ground, including women organizations, communities, and government institutions as well, to make climate finance more gender responsive, because it's the only way to ensure that women can cope with the effects of climate change. Through our flagship program, UN Women is aligning gender responsive budgeting with gender-responsive budgeting, with climate budgeting for greater impact. So we really hope that today the panel will help to bring more light on these issues in terms of what does it take to ensure this greater access to gender-responsive climate finance. What does it take to have greater engagement of women in climate policy finance decision-making? Or what does it take for women to be part of project implementation and policy making as well? So now let's officially launch the event. And I would like to start by particularly welcoming our keynote speaker, Elsa Velasco. She's the coordinator of Euroclima Plus program within the Economic Development and Environment Department of FIIAPP, which stands for the entity of Spanish cooperation system that is specialized in the promotion of public policies. Elsa has extensive experience spanning over 12 years in international relations and technical management as well, of peer-to-peer cooperation projects with the specializations in projects funded by the European Commission. She has proven experience as well in managing climate change projects, including programs that promote environmental sustainability and enhance climate resilience in Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa. Elsa, many thanks for accepting the invitation. The floor is yours to provide the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you and welcome all to the Spanish Pavilion. Also, I would like to thank the people that we do have online, and thank you so much for the rest of the speakers. We have a couple that they're joining us late, so let's hope they can make it and they don't get lost. Well, thank you again for joining us for the crucial session on gender-responsive climate finance. For me, it's a privilege to stand before you as gathered to explore here the intersection of climate change action, gender equality, and financial transparency. As we all know, climate change is not just an environmental issue, it's a profound social challenge that disproportionately affects women and girls around the world. The impacts of climate change, ranging from extreme weather events of food, livelihoods, and personal security, and in many regions, women are the primary caregivers and providers of their families, yet they often lack access to resources and support necessary to adapt to the changing conditions. This reality not only exacerbates existing inequality, but also deepens the cycle of poverty. Today, we will address the significant barriers that women face in accessing climate finance. Discriminatory lending practices, limited social protection, and exclusion from decision-making processes are just a few of the challenges that hinder women's participation on climate finance. Moreover, we must confront the substantial data gaps and existing regarding gender-responsive climate finance and the integration of gender consideration into climate policies. This event will aim to explore the intersection of climate action, gender equality, and financial transparency, underscoring the critical role of gender in transformative climate finance. It will also address the gender impacts of climate change on women and girls. This is normally something overwhelming in the capacity building of women to maintain adequate livelihoods, food, water, or personal security. It is also indebting women and exacerbating these inequalities and poverty. Compounding this are the significant barriers women face in accessing finance, receiving public sector social protection, or engaging decision-making and policy development processes on climate change. Additionally, there are substantial data gaps on gender-responsive climate finance and how gender considerations have been integrated in these climate finance processes. This event will highlight the importance of integrating gender perspective into climate policies and financing while promoting transparency and accountability in the climate finance. Our gathering today aims to shine a light on these critical issues. We will explore additional recommendations for policymakers to ensure that gender-responsive approaches are at the forefront of the climate finance and policy development. We will also facilitate knowledge sharing among experts from various regions and sectors, highlighting best practices that promote gender equality and climate action. As we embark on this important dialogue, let us remember that integrating gender perspectives into climate finance is not a matter of fairness. It is essential for effective climate action. And by fostering collaboration among international organizations, government, civil society, and private sector, we really can advance on gender-responsive climate policies and benefit everybody. I encourage the speakers to engage actively in today's discussion, share the insights, the collaborative solutions that will empower women and girls in the face of climate change. Together, I think we can pave the way for more equity and a sustainable future. And I'd like, again, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the commitment on the vital cause.
Great, thank you so much for, it's a bit strange, I think, when it's very noisy around to be able to hear yourself thinking and actually, sort of try to see how the voice carries over. But we'll try to, maybe speak louder so I can feel actually that I hear myself thinking. First of all, thank you so much for the very inspiring contribution and the reminder as well to all of us, the importance of emphasizing the, let's say, the necessity of involving women in climate policies and actions, and also highlighting the challenges women face in accessing finance and gender data gaps. They're absolutely critical as well to be addressed, as you have rightly said. So indeed, this is a critical time, as we all know, being here at this COP29, to push for these progressive visions, to make sure that we see an impact and a difference in the lives of women and girls. Another huge thanks. And let me now start with our esteemed group of panelists. And just to remind you again, there are two more panelists that are going to join us shortly. So I will start maybe with Sasha. And Sasha is actually an ally and a friend of UN Women in Europe and Central Asia. And very, let's say, present and active in a lot of our events and conferences. So we are grateful again that you're able to join us. Sasha has a very impressive background, and you'll agree with me when I just be able to detail that a bit. First of all, she's the director for Women for Common Future, and she became engaged with feminist organizations that were active at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. And moved at WCF to help coordinate delegation of eco-feminist organization that participated in the Fourth World Women Conference in Beijing in 1995. So she's a walking knowledge hub, actually, So a result of these conferences, the UN actually recognized women's civil society organizations as an important stakeholder in policy processes. and were given actually observer seats at the negotiations. So Sasha co-organized the women's major group at the UN for many years, together with colleagues from WIDO, that probably many of you know of, which resulted in gender equality references in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the SDG 5 as well, and helped to create the Women and Gender Constituency at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in 2006. So no further comment, really incredibly powerful woman. So always an honor to have you. So, well, I'd like to start with you. If you can share with the audience here and in the room and online on the role of women's organizations that are really critical in shaping effective climate policies. And more specifically, how has your own organization, has helped to shape those policies and ensure the participation of women in those policies? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ella. And hello, everybody. And I think there are a few more women here from the women's constituency. I see Ruth sitting over there, my colleague from the Caribbean.
Fantastic.
And another colleague over there from Germany. Yeah. Thank you for being here. So thank you. I think the women's organizations have been very powerful in this space of the climate negotiations. I don't know if you know our constituency. We meet every morning at 9. You're welcome to join us if you're from a civil society organization. And we've really helped to push for specific policies, including, of course, the Gender Action Plan, which we have here as part of the Paris Agreement, and which needs to be renewed. And we will be working on that in the coming 2 weeks very hard, as well as the Lima work program on gender. And this is important because it means that we need to have gender responsive policies in all part of the negotiations of the UNFCCC. And we have managed, of course, already a lot. We do have a Green Climate Fund with a very strong gender policy. All the applications for resources and funding to the Green Climate Fund need to show a gender analysis. We have seen in your region of Central Asia, but also in the Caucasus, engagement. Our organization, we help to develop, for example, the Green Climate Fund project for Georgia, where we really insisted on having a part regarding access to renewable energy and renewable energy technologies and funding for women in local communities to become leaders of enterprises or cooperatives which provide renewable energy. But we know it's a big challenge because so far, the thresholds are very high. Any big climate fund starts at 10 million euros. Often the type of infrastructure and businesses we are looking at, they need maybe a few 100,000 or 1 million or so. So this gap is very big. So we have also been pushing for more small and micro loans and grants in the climate funds so that you can really reach the women entrepreneurs on the ground. And I think there's still a lot to do. We have not achieved that, so that's why it's important to be negotiating here also as part of the finance track on this accessibility. Access for local communities, but also for local women's organizations and entrepreneurs. And for that, you need capacity building, because we know that women are still discriminated. Many women face huge barriers. They don't have land rights, they don't own the house, so it's difficult to get a loan. So you have to address these underlying patriarchal barriers, which we have in so many countries, to create the same equal footing for women and men to access climate funding. And we have some really great examples. If you're still here next week on Wednesday, every year at the COP, we organize the Gender Just Climate Solutions Award. This year, again, there will, from 900 groups, 3 have been awarded. And for example, amongst them, we have had last year groups working in Congo DRC on women's land rights so that they can protect the forests. And we have worked with women in India who are working with cooperatives of women farmers, low-income women farmers, who have created cooperatives to capture the rainwater during the monsoon, to then get loans to invest in small systems, they call it, bangru, so that they can reuse the water of the monsoon for 1 or 2 extra harvests, which make the difference between living on a really low income to living, with possibilities to maybe sell and expand their activities. These are climate solutions. These are gender-just climate solutions. But it's very difficult to get the type of funding to these type of solutions. So that's where we come in, and we're trying to push also our friends from the banks to do a little bit more with grant funding alongside loan funding, so that we can really, bring the women to the same level through capacity building, to maybe changing the law so they can have access to land rights, for example, for them to really also take part in programs which are funded with climate funds. Thank you, Ella.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think as well, as you have said, indeed, successful climate actions and solutions do need the creative resources of women organizations. As women are powerful climate agents, and you talked about how women can actually be leaders, entrepreneurs, they can be innovators as well. But what is actually missing, the gender-just climate solutions, and we need the funding. How we'll be able to get that, to make sure we move the needle on this. And I think, as you rightfully said as well, this gender-responsive policies and accessibility, these are absolutely critical as well to be able to move forward. So I think now we are really happy to have our 2 other panelists with us. And I think I'd like to maybe start with Sandra, since really the order and the sequence. Well, I'd like to introduce Sandra as well, another, as I mentioned, as the other 2 women before her, equally highly experienced professional and very powerful as one in her own right. She's the CEO and founder of GFLAC, which stands for the Climate Finance Group for Latin America and the Caribbean. Sandra has been working on areas such as tracking climate finance flows and needs, elaborating national strategies on climate finance, and mainstreaming climate change in public finance systems. She's the author of Sustainable Finance Index and created other methodologies related to climate finance tracking. I mean, I'll be so interested to hear more about that. Sandra has over 16 years of experience in climate policy, climate finance, and climate negotiations. So I just want to add one more thing, because I think it's incredibly relevant as well for why we are here over these 2 weeks. Sandra has worked as a consultant for the Standing Committee on Climate Finance at the UNFCCC on the first reports on the determination of the needs of developing country parties related to the implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And she's the former General Director of Climate Change Policy at the Ministry of the Environment and Natural Resources of Mexico. So yeah, wow, another incredibly impressive panelist. So Sandra, we'd like to hear more from you. What does your organization does on gender-responsive climate finance, and how do you ensure that the, let's say, the focus on increasing the transparency and accountability of climate finance are really taken into account, so that the funds are effectively allocated to support the most vulnerable populations? It's exactly what Sasha was mentioning earlier. Over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and particularly to discuss something that is deep in my heart, one of the most relevant topics. And I think when we talk about the role of women, I see it in 2 levels. Myself, I founded the Climate Finance Group for Latin America and the Caribbean because when I started to work on this 18 years ago, I realized that the financial system was so male-dominated, very male-driven. The type of discussions, the type of conversations, the type of mechanisms, the type of policies that they have in the system are highly male-dominated. And why I'm saying this? Because when you see the type of projects that they support, they tend to think in these massive infrastructure projects. They don't tend to think in the community side, in the decentralization of projects. And when we talk about tackling the climate crisis, we know that not everything is about these massive transformations. It's about how to start from the bottom to the top, and understanding why are we in a crisis. why do we need an infrastructure? Why do we need a pathway? Why do we need so I think the perception of the problem is that when we see how to really rethink the financial system, you cannot just think in these massive problems, but actually understanding what is happening in the ground. And I think that's why when you see projects failing badly at the local level, is because they fail in having this engagement from local populations, from local led populations that most of the times are women behind this like understanding. And when you invite to the table to people that are not understanding what is happening in the ground, obviously you will fail. And we observe this in the multilateral development banks. We observe this in the national development banks. So I started to think, why is this happening? And the very first thing that I thought at that time is like, who is in the table? Most of the conversation, I started on this, 18 years ago, and I was the youngest, the Latina, the young woman there. And I remember having these conversations with some colleagues like, oh, but you are so passionate. It was all about passion. And I was like, no, it's not only about passion. I mean, I have been studying, I have been preparing myself. And what I can say is that in order to transform, you have to understand the roots of the problems. And in order for me to really break down, I was like, first of all, I really want to create an organization that is women-led. GFLAG has now, it was only women for 12 years. And then we finally have a couple of men in the team. And we are trying to generate some gender balance there. But because I really wanted to have a space where we can have hard discussions. And for me, it was always important to kind of understand the system. So I went like studying how the national development banks work, how the MDBs work, how the UNTRIPLE system works. And now I can say that there are two main elements, and I would like to echo what you said. What is needed? First, really bringing women to the table, but not only to support the local women at these small scale projects. Those are critical and it's very important to have them. But locally, we have more women also taking decisions in cities, also taking decisions at different levels, more entrepreneurs that are asking about not these small projects, but there are more women like really risking a lot at different scales. So I think it's not only a matter of the local, but it's a matter of really giving them the chance to be in the table and to shape discussions and shape conversations. And this is not a fight against men, no. Let's take them at the same time and listen the different problems that we are observing that sometimes our colleagues don't see. And we see this all the time. It's not a fight. It's just listen our perspective, and then you will have a full project. You will have the full picture, and then you will be able to take better decisions. And finally, totally access. Let's stop thinking that women cannot handle money. Women can handle money and can handle different amounts of money. This is not only about like the small grants, but we can handle big money, and we don't have to be afraid of leaving the women to take decisions in administrating, in managing. And I think this is the way forward in accessing not only to the small ones, but also leaving women to lead the big pools of capital that are out there. Because to be fair, and in my point of view, if you leave women to manage and to handle the big pools, we will be having a different conversation in terms of where is the money allocated. It's not going to be in wars. It's not going to be in fueling the military system. It's going to go to actually tackle crises such as climate change and protecting nature. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the inspiring words. And I think, I liked what you said, the idea of going back to the roots. And often we can find solutions that can really help us to address a lot of the challenges. And I remember from my previous incarnation with another organization that when we talked about traditional knowledge, often this is the one that that women can do and can bring those kind of solutions at the table. So we need to give them the chance to be able to have that voice, to be able to contribute meaningfully and to be able to make a difference. Thank you so much again, and I will come back with the second round of questions. But I think I'd like to move now to Jimena. I know it's we have a different panelist online, but she was unable to join, and Jimena has kindly stepped in. And Jimena is the Director of Mitigation in Ministry of Environment of Peru. And Jimena is also an engineer with a lot of experience on environment and development, with over 14 years of work experience in climate change issues, particularly in the development of public policies for the inclusion of climate change in the implementation of greenhouse gas mitigation projects. And she's also, I think, provided a lot of technical advice to the private sector on environmental management and social responsibility. And I think what I'd like to ask you first as well, in terms of learning from your experience as well, what do you think in terms of the gender responsive policies, how they can be better integrated into climate action plans, but also nationally determined contributions into the NDCs? Over to you.
Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. Well, thank you for the invitation to Veriaska, but unfortunately she couldn't be here. But I'm really happy for being at the instead of her. And well, let me tell you that, of course, from the ministry, from the direction of climate change, we have to, our approach, and of course, to tackle the climate changes in terms of mitigation and adaptation, we have to think first of all that which are the people who are mostly affected, right? And we already know that consequences are highly women are probably the worst consequences for the climate change, for the climate change effects at the moment. So, and of course, when we have to think about measures in terms of adaptation, and we have to think probably first of all in her, and we have to think also in her, and we have to ask her in order to think how to plan the appropriate measures in order to plan to deploy appropriate plans in our country. So and this is the way that we're looking for to work and integrate the gender perspective as into the climate policies. We think it is essential and to ensure the effective equality and to respond these consequences, and also it's essential also to develop this adequate tools to respond and also allows to mainstream this gender perspective in the NDCs of the country. The NDCs for climate, also the climate change plans, climate change, for example, plans developed in the territorials and local areas have to integrate the perspective of the different kind of different women from different kind of areas. That's important for us as well. I would like to highlight some kind of different specific experience that we are already incorporated. In Peru, we have we also succeed with establishing a national commission of women and climate change. Actually, they have 2 representatives in our national commissions on climate change as well, and they are very active in various spaces at the national and political levels as well. And also when we are talking about, okay, what is the role, why they are so important to have this representative of women in all this area, and also, for example, I heard what you're talking about okay, it's not only about to have women in local areas or in different levels, but I think that this is important. It's important having women taking decisions, because in another way there is no. I think women are aware about the problems that they have. Not only they are really aware about the real problems that have all kind of women at the end. And a very important example that I have at the moment in my mind is it was because of the women the representation of women that we have now, for example, at the different projects and different ministers at the moment. We got this really nice project at the Ministry of Energy, e-Mujer, who came with capacity building, and it was a training for entrepreneurial women who start to develop different. They establish they training first, and they training different women and girls in order to have the entrepreneur, in order to have this to promote these entrepreneurial women, to promote energy technologies in rural areas. It was really, it's still really successful for us in some regions where they don't have access to the net connection. So I think that when we are talking about the gender perspective or all this area, at the end of the time are really concrete issues that can change the life of many people and many women at the end. So it can translate in real actions, and it's very important what my colleagues are just mentioned at this moment. It's not just include women because it's a quota of gender. It's include women because they can see what is really missing, and because the women are really aware about the gaps that have to be fulfilled, and about the really needs they have to be covered at the end, and in many areas. Yeah. And for us it's very important, especially at this moment, that we can working in our new cycle of indices, for example.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your intervention. I think you're absolutely right in terms of ensuring the meaningful participation. It's exactly what you're referring to. And ensuring the participation of women at the local level in developing local plans as well. And I think really resonates and mirrors what Sasha was talking about in terms of capacity building of women entrepreneurs. That, you know, it's absolutely crucial as well to be able to move on this. So thank you again. Last but not least, I would like to invite now Stephen Driscoll, who is the head of Environment, Climate and Social Policy at the European Investment Bank. And he plays a pivotal role in the bank's evolution into the climate bank in the coming years. And Stephen, I was in Brussels actually last week, and I did meet with some of your colleagues, and we had a lot of very, I think, inspiring conversations, because I was particularly impressed with the bank's approach in promoting gender-responsive climate finance. Can you kindly share with the audience as well in terms of what does EIB in terms of promoting gender-responsive climate finance. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us onto the panel here. Much appreciated. And I apologise, I can't share half the credentials that my esteemed panellists have here. I think the short answer to your question is that we do a lot in this area. I actually have a really small gender team within my division, but they are so passionate about what they do, honestly, just to try and make sure that as much of our financing as possible responds to both gender and climate imperatives. So I'm actually really proud with what they've achieved. What drives us is that we know it leads to better climate and business outcomes, economic growth, inclusive economic growth and women's economic empowerment. But more fundamentally, it's actually just about doing the right thing. And having two gorgeous girls myself, I really do feel strongly about this. I mean, research has shown that companies that do have better gender diversity are 50% more likely to have reduced emissions, reduced waste, and have better ESG credentials. So there's the case, right? And as we know, men and women are impacted differently by climate change. They don't have access to the same resources. And so we at the EIB really think that well-designed climate solutions can actually tackle and address that inequality gap. I don't know whether the audience know much about the EIB, but we've been the largest multilateral climate financier for many years now. All our financing has been Paris-aligned since 2020. And over 50% of our financing is actually green, goes towards green projects. And our lending volume was, across the group, was about 100 billion last year, so that's 50 billion for green projects. And our climate bank roadmap, our adaptation plan, and our gender action plan, which was the outcome of our gender strategy, are really the kind of operational blueprints for how we're transforming ourselves into the climate bank. It's a journey. And promoting gender-responsive climate finance within that is an important aspect for us. And what this means in practice really is that we look for projects that promote both, promote both climate and gender. So we're looking for projects where female entrepreneurs and fund managers are involved. We look to address gender and social inequalities in such as energy poverty and so on. And we look for projects and businesses that provide green employment, leadership, and income opportunities for women. Last year, actually, I was just looking at the numbers yesterday, we invested almost 6 billion across 63 projects throughout the world that had a significant contribution to gender equality. And more than half of these actually supported climate action and environmental sustainability goals as well. So I think we're coming on to give some examples, right? So I can give some there. And then about consolidated learning, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but recently with EBRD and the British International Investment Group, we've developed what we call the Gender Smart Climate Finance Guide on behalf of the 2X Global Initiative. And this really is a series of 11 sector notes and to guide investors to apply a gender lens in climate finance investments. So I can highly recommend this if you've not seen it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I think, yeah, you can rely on a banker to hit the nail on the head in terms of finding the right, let's say, semantics in explaining this. Because working on gender, it's about doing the right thing. Simple as that, you know. So I think it's you're absolutely right, and I think we can't underestimate in terms of the role of IFIs in pushing the gender agenda and ensuring this the accessibility to finance and climate finance for women-owned organizations as well. So I think increasingly a lot of international organizations and other partners are working much closer with IFIs to be able to push to ensure meaningful results. Let me go back, I think, for just one more round of more practical type of examples, and I'll start with you, Sasha, since you're closer. I'd like to maybe hear as well from your perspective, what could be from the main challenges that you find in terms of how climate finance sometimes fails to reach women's organizations and how we can turn those around as well. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, Nella, because we would like to see the expertise which you have within all these feminist gender organizations to be better used by the banks. But of course, we as civil society organizations, we're not for profit, we are non-profit. So when we work for you, we work, but someone needs to pay for that. So that's why we see also the need to always have a grant component. And I was telling our colleague that I was listening to a really interesting project which was combining climate and biodiversity funding with a focus on women from one of the development banks in Europe. And they had 280 million for 3 countries. But out of the 280 million, 40 million were grants to specifically do capacity building, work also with local women groups and feminist organizations to get their expertise to better understand the barriers, the underlying barriers, and also how to have a just transition where you look at care and the care economy, because in many countries women are still the main doers of all the care. And if you can't share that burden better, you're going to give a double or a triple burden to women, which might not be what you want to do either, right? So you have to look more at the system approach, and you have to better understand how you can reduce some of the barriers for these women so that they can adopt these loans. And you also might want to really have accessibility to grants. I mean, why would big companies get subsidies to do climate work, and why would the smallest women's farmers only have to take loans? So you should also think about having combinations so you can make these first steps. We saw it in Georgia. Having investments in renewable energy in rural households, women-led households, is great. But investing 100 or 500 or 1,000 euros to install solar panels or water heaters is for small families, especially women-led families, a very big burden. So yes, we were working partly with grants. So we were giving small subsidies so that they could make these first steps and then reduce their costs and then invest a bit more. So you need a combination. And I find one of the problems we see is that many of the climate funds only give loans. They give low interest loans. The EIB is an example. You only give loans, if I understand well, they are low interest loans, but you don't have grant components as far as I understand. We would call for that. We would say you need that combination. And you need to give it at the right moment, so that you can scale up from small to large. Because I agree, we don't only want micro loans and micro grants, but you have to start at the right level. And if you're working specifically also with the most vulnerable groups and the most vulnerable women in climate-affected areas, then you have to be able to make these steps. So that's one of the things we have been looking at. In Georgia, we created also cooperation with a credit organization so that you could combine grants and credits. And I'm really happy that some of the projects which have, for example, received the Gender Just Climate Solutions Award are being upscaled. And here the only other point I want to mention is sometimes they face unfair competition. For example, we had a great women entrepreneur working on alternatives to plastics. Plastics is made from oil, plastic pollution is a climate problem, methane, etc. So if you can have alternatives, that's good also for the climate. But her investments had a very high tax, whereas the imports of the plastic alternative products had a much lower tax. So you also have to look at what are we in our economy subsidizing for brown investments, and how can we create also a fairer and better space for women investors when they really start investing in alternative green solutions. And I think this is another issue here, because we believe, as the women's and feminist NGOs, that there is a lot of talk about what we would call false solutions. Where climate money is to go maybe into projects which, in the end, I mean, of course, we can talk about carbon, carbon sinks and stuff like that, but it would be so much better maybe to directly invest in some of the solutions, such as renewable energy and agroecology, etc. So we also need to try to balance out do a little bit more of the good and a little bit less of the bad. Because as far as I know, we're still investing 690 billion euros in oil, gas, and fossil fuels. I mean, why are we subsidizing that, you know? So.
Amen to that, for sure. No, thank you so much. And I think I like the idea in terms of how do you find that combination between loans and grants, you know, to be able to support women investors as well at the local level and finding those creative solutions. And they are, you know, what I was really surprised, I mentioned from different reincarnation with that organization, traveling to a lot of the rural areas in Africa, for instance. And there are so many wonderful solutions that are adapted by women at the local level, but we don't know sort of how to find those, extract them, and try to adapt them and scale them up in other regions, in other countries. So the importance of sharing this knowledge, it's absolutely critical and across the board. So I want to move now to Sandra. And I'd like to hear more from you in terms of what are some of the tools that you think that are important, what are some of the frameworks as well that are currently available to track gender responsive climate finance, and how effective are they? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, allow me to connect this discussion with the negotiation discussion. Because we are here discussing the new collective quantified goal, which is this new goal that we replaced the 100 billion that was promised back in 2009. And I think two of the major lessons learned that we got from those 100 billion, one is that we cannot get out with only one number, because one number is not enough. When you don't have the qualitative side of the number, then you may say like, oh, well, we have all this money, but where is this money gonna go? And I think this is precisely one of the elements that brings us to the gender responsive, which is how can we set qualitative elements that will ensure that that money, let's say, doesn't matter the number, it matters, and I will say something about it, but let's say that doesn't matter the number. Like, if you set the right qualitative elements, you will increase the effectiveness of that money. And what I'm saying is, for sure, access. And access at all levels. The second element is, I totally agree that the type of finance will be very different for the type of actions that you are pursuing. It's not the same, the adaptation, than mitigation. The adaptation is not a change in technology. Like in mitigation, you can change a diesel car from an electric car, and you are already reducing emissions, and therefore you will be able to generate a profit. Adaptation doesn't work like that. Adaptation is a process. And it happens that most of the times this adaptation is local, and most of the times this adaptation is women-led. So how can you ensure that the right amount of money and the right type, because in this case, adaptation is not going to give you a profit. Therefore, you need more grant space. You need more like this long-term investment for the people to survive, to adapt, to get more resilient. And the type of money that you will need for those is not the same that you will need for mitigation. And it's not the same, the one that you are gonna get for loss and damage, for sure. But then you also have other type of schemes, like how to ensure that the right funds are in the right institutions, for instance. Yeah, like I think the MDBs have been doing a lot of work in terms of aligning the flows with the Paris Agreement. But it is true that like for the MDBs, it's very difficult to get to those like very, very small local levels. Like they are not made to disperse this very like diverse type of mechanism. So it's how to create the right architecture, how to create the right funds, the right mechanisms to ensure that that money goes where it's needed. When I was the director of the climate change in the environmental ministry, for us was really clear that we needed a fund that would be able to mobilize different sources and have different channels for different purposes. And for us was critical to mainstream and do cross-cutting gender responsive mechanisms, like to say, this is not only about generating the right incentives for women and award them for all the work that they are doing, but it's also about how to avoid that these inequalities keep increasing, because then you are saying, okay, women are accessing to more money, but it happens that at the domestic level, they are still dealing with the family. So they are having these triple burdens, like leading with this management kind of like activities, plus their all activities at home. So it's how to create the right incentives for the right type of processes. And I think this is precisely why, for us, the NCQG, this new collective goal, is a huge opportunity to learn from those 100 billion, to get out with a good amount of money that is provision, that is public money, that is grants, and that goes mainly for adaptation actions. Because it's these type of activities, we're going to get from out there more money. Mitigation will create more money, and money is out there for mitigation, a lot of money. We don't even know how much is it. But for adaptation, we will need it. And that's why we have to connect the dots and really make these processes valuable, and then really connect with the realities and with the real needs. And it's at the end of the day what we want, like funds that tackles or that responds to those needs and priorities in developing countries.
Really excellent. Thank you so much. And, I like the idea of, exactly. The idea of, we need this long-term investment, for resilience. But how do we create that appropriate architecture that it's absolutely critical to ensure that exactly what we've been talking about this past hour, the funds really go where they need to go. And then creating those right incentives. So absolutely, we all know that we are here, the collective quantifiable goal. We're all waiting to see what happens at the end of these 2 weeks. So we are really hopeful that it could help to provide a bit of a framework. So thank you so much. They're really, really inspiring thoughts. If Jimena, I'll just over to you now. We mentioned earlier as well the importance of partnerships. So what do you think partners in general, international partners, being international organizations or funding partners, can maybe help do in supporting countries to adapt these gender responsive approaches to climate finance? So how the partners can support the governments to be able to advance this agenda?
Well, the most important thing I think should be they should support us in the most suitable way. I mean, we're already working. We already have a lot of organization. Or women making climate action. They already know what to have to do in order to resilience and order to adapt it, and they already know what they need in terms of finance, in terms of capacity needs of implementation. So I think this kind of organization have to try to align with that kind of needs. And as I said before, my colleague said before, we have to think about a financial mechanism and with different kind of mechanism inside. I mean, more flexible. I think the flexibility is very, very important, because at the end, I will talk about Peru, for example. In Peru, the women have different kind of. They are already organized, well organized. So they have sometimes in small groups, in small businesses, in a small project, big projects. So they have different kind of finance support and in different scale. So if if they were looking for finance supported, they have to find the appropriate they need support, and sometimes it's so difficult to match in terms of because when the funding comes, it's so difficult to make the match at the end. So I think it should be very, very flexible in the end. And I was thinking in my head when you were talking about the about how should we think about. Of course, I totally agree that we should be think about first about the adaptation. Of course, actually for us in our in Peru and for our ministry is a priority, the adaptation. We think that, of course, after the prioritization of adaptation, we think about mitigation, because first of all we have to respond of the actions that are happening now. Because if something happens, if some catastrophes and some floods, something happen, we have to just run in order to save lives, save fields, and ensure the food security. I mean, there are priorities for us. There are under every kind of circumstances, and in terms of mitigation, of course, we think that we have to looking for a private sector. We can try to promote all kind of mechanisms. We're looking for any kind of partners at the end, but the adaptation and the resiliences are the way to ensure the future of everything. The future, and indeed, is our priority, and this is our priority also when we're looking for this kind of supporting as well. So and the reality is the most difficult is the most difficult funding that were found at the end. So of course, when we're trying to, if we added the gender perspective, or if we added, for example, that we're trying to introduce some kinds of gender perspective in the projects and of that kind of things, it's more difficult. And so I want to end with this, is that it's very important for us to try to find flexibility in the partners at the end. I think this is the most important thing for us. That is what we're looking for.
Yeah, and absolutely, fully agree. Flexibility is key, and I think the fact that what you're mentioning, that women know their needs, and it's exactly as Sasha was saying, that women need to have the choice to be able to offer a seat at the table to that, because that's where they can express those needs, and then they can be also addressed, and then going back to having that architecture and incentives as well, sort of through to address the needs that women have. Thank you so much. And Stephen, just one question to you as well, in terms of, as you mentioned earlier as well, if you can share a concrete example and how EIB promotes gender equality in its climate finance investments. That would be great. Thanks.
I guess I need to be quick because we're close to time.
We have
just picking up on one point from Sasha, though, the mandate of the EIB as a public bank is actually to lend, blend and advise. So lending is providing large amounts of cheap financing with long tenors. Lending is where we combine grants that we get a lot from the Commission with guarantees and other sources of financing. So we do what you were referring to there. And then advising is also really important because it's about the upstream capacity building and so on. And we're actually doing some quite interesting work in that respect. For example, with the maritime sector in the Netherlands, to try and promote a bit of gender equality there in the maritime sector. So just, interesting.
Yes.
A concrete example, just very quickly, is actually a loan that we signed very recently with Burn Manufacturing, which is a company in Kenya, to produce and distribute about 1 million clean cooking stoves. That's going to benefit about 6.5 million people and reduce 12 million tons of emissions, something like that. So, clearly this affects women more than men. 70% of their client base is women. And this was actually verified by the 2X system as well as contributing significantly. So as we're short in time, these are the kinds of things that we're trying to find. Another interesting one is actually eco-enterprise in Southern America, where we're kind of targeting women-led biodiversity projects, trying to get really down to the to the individual landowners and smallholders and things, and we're looking for more of those as well.
Fantastic. Great, excellent. Thank you so much. And I think we are almost on time, 2 minutes over time. I'd like to thank all my panelists for very inspirational interventions, and I think we all learned a lot. And I want to thank the audience here and online as well for listening to us, and we hope to see you soon as well. Thank you. Thank you, Troy.